So we're kind of getting boxed in, but in a good way, because it drives to really more clarity when you're looking at where to go next. Not be satisfied with the idea that plastics are perfect, there's nowhere else for them to go. That can't be right, because it's not right for anything else. They're using methane sourced from wastewater facilities as the hydrocarbon source to create plastic packaging that is in turn degradable. A biomimicry, where you're taking essentially solutions from nature and using that as a jumping off point for innovation. But you might not really have any added chemicals, any processing chemicals at all, because you're not making it, you're growing it. It's like a NASCAR as far as all the information they have on there that speaks to the reduction in this and the impact and change on that. So they've done a really good job of saying, you know what, here's the change, here's how we did it, and right here on the package, we're describing to you all of the great things or all of the improvements that this package brings. So it becomes less about philosophy and more about, okay, this company has chosen to take this leap. Yeah, and that's a powerful example of the relevance of clean packaging. It's not just to have bragging rights at cocktail parties. It can have an actual impact on your life.
Welcome to Packaging Speaks, where we explore the career journeys, insights, and innovations shaping the packaging industry. I'm your host, Christian Ellis. Today, I'm joined by Jay Edwards, an experienced packaging engineer, financial advisor, and founder of Pack to Sustain. Jay's career path has been anything but traditional. He started in packaging, pivoted to financial advising, and now is re-engaging with the industry through fractional consulting and thought leadership. In this episode, we'll dive into Jay's recent presentation for Walmart, where he explored global trends and extended producer responsibility in clean packaging. We'll also talk about his consulting goals, the intersection of packaging and food safety, and how professionals can navigate career pivots while staying connected to their passion. Let's get started. Jay, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I guess to get started, let's talk a little bit about how you got into packaging, where it all got started. What was your passion?
Yes, kind of a fun story. I was originally studying environmental engineering and actually gotten my degrees in that field, but I got a couple of summer internships kind of in graduate school time frame with Kraft Foods in packaging R&D. And it was interesting because I really had not studied packaging per se. I took one material science class as part of my graduate studies that really kind of lit the spark of interest. Mm-hmm. So working in that field became really fascinating because I didn't know anything about packaging at all before working in that field. I just thought this stuff just kind of appeared. So the amount of science involved in the art of making packaging components was really compelling. And the more I worked in it and the more I learned, the more I loved it.
That's not uncommon. The number of people I've talked with, heard from, know in the space that have said, "Oh, I didn't even know about packaging until I was already, somewhat in a scientific space." It's a lot of folks. I guess it just doesn't get a lot of forethought, or it hasn't. But packaging is moving now, right to the beginning of the process, in a lot of organizations, looked at as a value instead of a necessary evil.
Excellent. Yeah, that's true.
So, I guess you moved it into financial advising. Was there something going on in the industry that pushed you in that direction? Was that a personal move?
Yeah, it's kind of a series of moves. I went into consulting in the packaging space in 2011, and I was doing that for a couple of years. And for some reason, I would take little lunch breaks in my house, which is where I worked out of. And I was watching CNBC during my lunch breaks. For some reason, I was kind of like drawn to markets and just kind of learning more about markets. They were just kind of fascinating to me. Uh-huh. So that kind of set the stage for me to, I guess, be receptive when I got a call from a firm in the Portland area to explore the area of financial advising. And I was primed from an interest standpoint. I didn't quite realize exactly how arduous the licensing process would be. Not to mention that, but also kind of getting up and running in the financial advising industry. Yeah. It's completely different from working for a CPG. It
I
couldn't be
mean,
more different. So
where do you find your first clients moving
yeah,
into
and
packaging industries like
that's
that?
the key question, isn't it? Because depending on what firm you work for, it's you know let's put it this way: the first firm that I worked for, I got my licenses, and then essentially it was like, okay, here's the phone book, have at it.
Yeah.
so not not a lot of I kind of launched into it with some enthusiasm, but that's not the most efficient way to meet people is by
No.
reaching out and cold calling and reaching out on LinkedIn. So
No, but
fortunately,
it's a good way to cut your chops. I mean, when I came to PackStaff, Dad said to me, "The whole point in bringing you here is you're going to add value. So I'm going to give you your first client that this search is getting stale. Here's your first freebie, but go find some business." And it was like I'd never
yeah,
been in sales. I was learning how to cold call and do the whole thing. I actually made a pretty big mess of my first sales pitch, but they hired me
and
anyway. I think mostly because they felt bad.
to your point, I mean, it builds character and it gives you experience that you can't get any other way,
For sure.
by banging your head, basically. So
Yeah. So pick up some valuable skills in the financial space, but I mean also a lot not just from people skills, but I mean imagine a lot of perspective on business operations and finance and long-term finances.
yeah, that and it's also kind of a nice career from the standpoint of engaging with community because
Mhm.
packaging, really, everyone interfaces with packaging, but it's not always a business need to have a consultant in that area.
Right?
Whereas with finances, I mean, everybody cares about money, right? And everybody could benefit from some guidance in that area. They might not want it right at that point in time, but everyone can kind of benefit from it. So it's kind of a more broad customer base and kind of a nice community focus.
Okay. What's driving your return to packaging now?
Part of it's kind of practical. I mean, I've gotten myself established in the financial advising rhythm. So I
Sure.
have more time to really re-engage. I've never really turned away from packaging. I've always kind of kept tabs on what was going on. And there's just been a nice kind of crescendo of technologies, activity. And of course, now it's really coming to a head with EPR and clean packaging. So
Right.
I'm glad that I kind of stayed tuned in because now things are really at a place where there's a lot of excitement and a lot of possibility.
Not only have you stayed tuned in, but you can prove that you stayed tuned in because when was your book published?
Actually, the first part of this year,
Okay.
called it's called. Actually, I have a copy here, of course.
Yeah, got to do that. There it is. Yep.
Yeah, it's called Packaging Done
I
Right
don't
is
have my
Magic.
copy nearby. I have one somewhere though.
And thank you for buying one. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
But yeah, I was inspired to do that kind of late last year, and I think it was ultimately. Well, I'll back up a bit. My wife is on the alumni board for the Michigan State
Okay.
College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. The packaging school is within that college.
Hmm.
So, through her, I've always kind of been, kind of mindful of the student experience and looking at what was going on and kind of thinking back about my career, first at Kraft and then on my own. My thought was, how can I kind of distill as much guidance down as possible into an approachable format? So I kind of, position. The book is kind of subtitled, essentially a field guide, 33 years in the making. So I wanted to kind of speak to the packaging student audience, maybe first and foremost, but I wanted to make it broad enough to, really work for anybody who's curious about packaging. And it's also not a very long book, so it's not like, there's some
Right.
technical content, but you're not flipping through waiting for it to be over. So
Even
I
I
tried
could
to
read it.
strike that balance.
Yeah. Do I remember right? You kind of went around, you took the book around and toured the schools a little bit.
Yeah, I took it over to, well, I sent out either manuscripts or copies to kind of like the major packaging schools and got
Mhm.
recently some pretty good engagement at RIT. I'm actually from Rochester originally, so it's kind of fitting.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm kind of working with them to explore some other opportunities out above and beyond the book. But that was a really cool visit I'd never seen the packaging uh, college or facility at RIT, even
Mhm.
though I'm from there. So it was a nice visit.
I guess. I mean, I'm familiar with the book. I've read the book. What can you tell me about Pack to Sustain? When did you found that?
That was 2011. Yeah, that was an opportunity for me to really take all of the work that I've been doing at Craft and really distill it down to the core of what I enjoyed, right? So I wanted to really make sustainable packaging a main focus and looking at companies' various challenges, but doing it through a sustainability lens.
Right.
Even when companies came to me with essentially productivity projects, I still wanted to kind of challenge myself and say, okay, how can we uh, apply a sustainability lens to this work? So um, it was a lot of fun, and kind of the practical nature of consulting work is there are ebbs and flows. So
Hmm.
the financial advising piece, again, from a practical standpoint, is a nice hedge essentially to make
Right.
sure you always have something going on. So it's been a pretty. It took a while to settle in, but it's been a good marriage.
Okay. Um, when you say you look to put a sustainability lens on a project, can you talk to me more about what that means to you? I mean, I'm familiar with like life cycle analysis. I know that different packaging materials have different barrier properties, and I know oftentimes it's not just about the recyclability; it's also about how much it weighs, and how much fuel does it cost to move stuff around. What's the carbon footprint? How much water, et cetera, et cetera. What does sustainability mean for Pack to Sustain for yourself?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good point about LCA because LCA was really a main focus back in, I would guess, roughly 2007 or 8. That's when I think the Walmart scorecard came out, and
Okay.
some of their metrics were very LCA based, and that was a major focus at Craft as we kind of evaluated different options. That's always important. It's not being talked about quite as much as it used to. It used to be pretty much the barrier for entry. I mean, don't even talk about it until you have the LCA data.
Hmm.
Now there's a lot of other kind of competing philosophies as far as what is quote better than something else. So along with the LCA, it's just good to now have a lot of technologies that material suppliers are out there just taking the initiative to develop, and they might have their own LCA data that kind of support what they're trying to put forward. But now it's a little bit easier because you have just this ever expanding palette of options, some of which might be more applicable than others. But now you have the material suppliers and component suppliers out there kind of doing some of the heavy lifting and creating new avenues to get to reduced environmental impact. So it's really about, like I said before, just kind of staying tuned and understanding what's happening out there and then finding those fits where they occur.
And how do you do that? I mean, there's information all over the place. There's not only do you have the traditional media, the magazines and etc., but you've got marketing coming at you from all directions. I mean, you can't really even sit in your own living room and be away from advertising anymore.
Right.
Um, uh, you've got podcasts, you've got like this, you've got newsletters, you've got LinkedIn, you've got all these other places. How do you keep tabs on what's going on in the market and what interests you right now?
LinkedIn has been a good source for me, actually. Most of the stuff that I've found out about has been through LinkedIn just over the years. Just
Hmm.
not reading the feed for hours on end, but just kind of like a few minutes every day, just seeing what's happening, what's being discussed. And now we're at the point where we can look at, okay, what's out there in market. What are people testing? What are people launching? And how's it doing? So it
Hmm.
becomes less about philosophy and more about, okay, this company has chosen to take this leap, and this brand owner has signed on to this approach. How's it working out for them? So just kind of staying plugged into LinkedIn has been pretty good for me.
I think that's the survey. We last year we launched a survey effort, and we'll be doing it again this year. We're trying to build something that people actually look forward to reviewing. One of the questions we asked was where people get their information from, and LinkedIn was number one. Beat Packaging World. You think of when I first started in the industry, when we were still keeping resumes in filing cabinets. Um, um, the magazines, that was where your information came from, and the fax machine, the number of unsolicited, like the fax machine would just keep spitting out that was the spam mail of the day. It's crazy how much things have changed in the last
Indeed.
20 years. You mentioned briefly Walmart and its involvement in where they're collecting a lot of data from LCAs, or at least using LCAs to build their scorecard. It sounded like you've recently you've interacted with Walmart recently through Pact to Sustain, haven't you?
Yeah, the kind of the fun story there is I put the book out in about January,
Uh huh.
and a former colleague of my wife, who they used to work at ConAgra together, she
Okay.
noticed that the book had been released, and she was very excited to connect me to her colleague in food safety. He has a
Mm.
global role in food safety at Walmart, and he puts on a monthly uh, learning seminar, for lack of a better term, around various topics. And they had not yet covered packaging and the intersection between packaging and food safety. So I got invited to present on that topic in July, and that was pretty exciting because again it was kind of almost full circle because in my view Walmart, I think I'd say Walmart and probably the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, those were the two main forces back in, again, roughly '07, '08,
Hmm.
that really kind of caused the explosion of interest in sustainable packaging in the States. So to kind of re-engage with them again was kind of special. It was fun.
And what did you talk about?
Well, they gave me a couple of parameters. They wanted me to keep the conversation global because they didn't want me to talk about just a bunch of U.S. based technologies, whereas the call was being viewed globally
Right.
simultaneously across their entire network. So they wanted me to have global solutions and also wanted to tie in some way to food safety or quality. So fortunately, again, I'd been keeping tabs, low these several years, so I had to do a little bit of additional research to try to match everything up. But it
Hmm.
was more fun than work actually. And the theme was around what's happening in EPR currently, what's happening to maybe a somewhat lesser degree with clean packaging, and how these two things are, if you look at them at face value, they might be seen as constraints. But now we have kind of guide rails to drive innovation. Now the conversation is not just, okay, will the consumer pay for it? Or even, frankly, is there an LCA advantage? Although, of course, there should be. Now we have a new constraint of, okay, how much will this material cost us in EPR fees versus that material? And then we
Right.
also have on the clean packaging side, what are the additives in this material versus that material? So we're kind of getting boxed in, but in a good way because it drives to really more clarity when you're looking at where to go next.
Uh, Talk to me about clean packaging. I haven't. That's a term I'm not super familiar with. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, that's where you have chemicals of concern that are, and there's actually hundreds of them, but they're separated by tiers as far as level of concern of those chemicals of concern.
Okay.
And these are chemicals that are found as part of, typically added during the processing of a given material, and they're seen to have, or expected, or thought to have negative health impacts for humans or others.
It's like
So,
it's like my wife uses an app to scan food in the grocery store to know what kind of bad additive, yucca, something like that. I forget what the
interesting.
name of the app. Yeah.
Huh.
You scan the barcode and it'll tell you what all the additives are, and this is green, this is yellow, this is red, and the food
Interesting.
that is in our house has changed just because of the information she's got in her hand. It's
Yeah,
great.
that's wild.
Um, World's moving fast. It's also, I think some of that's a niche market too. She had kidney cancer several years ago, and as somebody who's been touched by cancer, you kind of reevaluate the life around you, and wow, how did she was in her early 30s, and
Wow.
it's like, how did I get this? Where did it come
Hmm.
from? And she kind of came to the conclusion it's got to be in the environment around us, and we're actively trying. She monitors what we're bringing in and what's in the food, and it's great to hear that clean packaging is a thing, and we're trying to get that stuff out of our packages too.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a powerful example of the relevance of clean packaging. It's not just to have bragging rights at cocktail parties. It can have an actual impact on your life. So
Yeah, for sure. What are the trends now? Where are we headed next? What's coming?
yeah, a couple thoughts. I mean, the one trend that's pretty obvious is they call it paperization, which is
Yep.
actually pretty interesting in that the one area that I've not seen discussed much here in the States is around closures. There's a few
Mm,
companies in Europe that are doing work to replace polypropylene closures with fiber based. And it's pretty interesting how it's like a pretty drop in solution that takes, it would appear, relatively small development lift to achieve. And caps really haven't been discussed much, in my view. So it's kind of an interesting way to kind of look at a low hanging fruit to make a
yeah.
change. And of course, there's paper bottles and all that stuff, which is actually quite interesting.
What are the
Um,
what are the greenhouse gas implications of moving to a fiber-based cap? Do you know that?
I don't know offhand, but I do know actually on my desk right here is a brand called Collective Good. It's a wine out of, it's actually sold through Target, and they've gone to the paper bottle approach. And I won't grab it right now, but it's like a NASCAR as far as all the information they have on there that speaks to
Mm,
the reduction in this and the impact change on that. So they've done a really good job of saying, you know what, here's the change, here's how we did it, and right here on the package, we're describing to you all of the great things or all of the improvements that this package brings. So that's kind of cool to see.
yeah, I think that's a great idea. Um, I don't think it's just because I've been in the packaging industry for 20 years. I think a lot of people, when they're in the store these days, are making choices based on what they think is best for the environment right now. And it would be great to have some not greenwashed, actual measurable, quantifiable information on a package to say this is why we made this choice.
Right, right,
I
yeah,
like that.
yeah. And the other trend that I see that I have personal interest in is kind of a bit of an overlap is biomimicry, where you're taking essentially solutions from nature and
Mm,
using that as a jumping off point for innovation. And there's more than one company doing work to use mushrooms, like the root structure of mushrooms, and growing that out into molded components that can serve as protective packaging, like Icapative, if I'm saying that right,
mm.
is one company that's doing that. Um, and they're literally growing the packaging; they're not
It
manufacturing it.
grows into a mold.
Right, right. So that's
Interesting.
where you have the opportunity to, and again, I'd have to get closer to this to know for sure, but you might not really have any added chemicals, any processing chemicals at all, because you're not making it, you're growing it. So it's an all
Right.
natural process. And, besides the scaling challenge,
Yeah.
it's a pretty clean
The
one.
amount of
So,
square footage it would take to grow, a bunch of packaging at the same time.
right. Yeah.
But
But,
still, I mean, the idea of just growing a package and not adding anything to it, that's pretty appealing.
yeah. Yeah.
No other trends. Paperization, that's real. I mean, that's everybody's seeing that. I shared a plastics are bad post the other day, not really just saying plastics are bad, but trying to engage in that topic. What's your, I guess, what's your view on the role of plastics in packaging?
Yeah. I think plastics, I know that plastics have a way to go. It's kind of like any other material. It's about evolution. I mean, at one point we didn't have polypropylene. That was something new. At one
Hmm.
point we didn't have polystyrene. That was something new. So now I think when it comes to plastics, obviously there are some things that material does very well. The question is what's next for that material, right? So there's one company called bad time to draw a blank, of course. Mango Materials. Okay, a short
Well
collapse
done.
there. They're
I
actually
draw a blank
based
all
out
the
of
time.
California, and they're using, and this kind of ties in my old environmental engineering background. They're using methane sourced from wastewater facilities
Hmm.
to as the hydrocarbon source to create packaging, plastic packaging that is in turn degradable but through anaerobic digestion. So they're kind of keeping that as they're using that as their material loop, as it were. Going from methane back to methane, and they're using a waste material to generate that packaging. So as you might imagine, there's a lot of development that has to go into that material performing in a packaging application.
Right.
But that was the same for polypropylene. That was the same for polyester. We just have to not be satisfied with the idea that plastics are perfect. There's nowhere else for them to go. They're great as they are. That can't be right because it's not right for anything else. So
I
just
agree
keep
with that.
evolving it.
Hmm. Okay. Um, your career's taken a somewhat, it's been an interesting, somewhat unique journey from a big recognizable food company to your own role into finance, back to packaging, maybe never really leaving packaging. What would you say? I guess I'd like to talk about career development and career advice for a second. Um, are there regrets you have in the moves you've made? Are there things you wish you had done differently? Um, I guess let's
Nothing
start
really
there.
jumps out, to be honest with you. I mean, the best advice I probably received at one point um, was from a manager of mine when was just about maybe like a year or two away from getting into a purely sustainable packaging role at Kraft, and I was kind of getting impatient for that to happen.
Hmm.
His advice was just to keep doing what you're doing. Now, I had been doing that pretty much for like 14 years. So my one advice would be patience, because I was pretty much just inserting myself into every single conversation that intersected packaging in the environment that I possibly could. And this was
Okay.
above my development role or role as a developer at the time. But I always was like just butting my nose in anytime, the environment and packaging was a conversation piece. Even simple stuff like bottle bills, when those would come up, back in the day, I would again poke my beak in and get in that conversation, so that when I finally had the chance to step into a fully environmental packaging role, I was ready and I was kind of, a somewhat obvious choice. So,
Yeah, everybody
um,
thought of you right away for that role because you've been talking about it for years.
yeah, in like 14 years. so,
Yeah,
so don't underestimate how long stuff takes.
not a lot of
It
people
always
have patience
takes,
for that.
yeah, it typically takes about, in my estimation, 5 to 7 times longer than you think. so,
Okay, stick to it. That's
yeah.
stick to it is great advice. We'll go with that. Um, we're leaning a little bit on the shorter side, Jay, but I feel like this has been a great conversation. It's been targeted. It's been concise. It's been full of information. If somebody wants to engage with Pax to Sustain or has what kind of work, I guess let's ask that. What kind of work are you interested in right now? If somebody wants to partner up with you, what really gets you excited?
Well, I mentioned one of the newer things I was fortunately approached to do or to enter into a partnership with a company called Manage Artworks. And they have a tool that's pretty is eye-opening to me when it comes to managing like the artwork flow process for packaging. That really hasn't been a focus of mine. It's been more about design and materials and such. But I mean, the reality is for the consumer, like you mentioned with your wife and that app,
Mm-hmm.
the consumer engages packaging almost primarily by what's on it, not what it's made of. So I was really happy to get approached by them and get familiar with their tool. So now I'm kind of looking at how my network might benefit from that stuff. So that's what's happening right now. Um, but yeah, just in general, I would say that there's not a whole lot that I haven't worked on. So I could probably engage and add some perspective to a whole array of different packaging material types, and really just trying to be a resource. Frankly, I mean that's the one position that I've taken with RIT that's been well received. Just kind of as I come across things or as I have thoughts about what might benefit RIT students, I kind of tee it up to their department and just kind of see what takes. So being a
And
resource is very
if it's
general.
good
But
info, I imagine their department's thinking, "Wow, this is not only is this well developed stuff, but it's stuff that we don't have to put work into," which
right,
um, and
right,
everybody's looking for, right?
sure,
So
sure, yeah,
awesome. Yeah, great to hear the ways you're looking to be involved, especially with the younger folks. I think we can all do a better job of helping pull more people into the industry and making those that come after their job a little easier. Um, you know, so I applaud you for that. I've enjoyed our conversation. I enjoyed the book, Jay. We will, of
great.
course, put all of the Pack to Sustain information in the post that's going to go up with the episode, and we'll put it at the bottom in the intro and all that stuff. So if people want to find you, I assume LinkedIn is the best place, right? You mentioned LinkedIn is where you get your stuff. I've seen you active there. So everybody should, when you're done here, run to LinkedIn and give Pack to Sustain a follow. And of course, Pack staff. We'd appreciate that too.
Yeah, no, thanks again for the time, and I love what you're doing here with this particular platform and the career focus. I'm not sure this is being done anywhere else, so you're a vanguard in that regard. So good
Well,
for
I
you.
hope we can. Thank you for that. I hope we can find a way to make it really useful, and yeah, we've got high hopes. So, thank you
Awesome.
for your time. Let's stay connected. Keep
Everyone,
engaged.
take care.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next time on Packaging Speaks.